What's up, YouTube? In a previous video, we diagnosed a P0171 and P0174 code. These are lane codes, meaning the vehicle has unmetered air entering the engine or not enough fuel is being delivered. Unmetered air was discovered and corrected, but the van is still running lean. How do we make sure no more vacuum leaks are present? Simple. Connect the vacuum gauge. I'll be disconnecting this check valve and connecting the gauge to this vacuum hose. The engine is idling and we are seeing a steady reading of 19 inches of mercury. A reading between 16 and 21 tells us this engine is working correctly. To further verify that, snap the throttle and see how the needle reacts. What's shown here is normal movement. No vacuum leaks here. Now we begin troubleshooting a fuel delivery issue. Here are the symptoms. Long-term fuel trims on both banks at 19%. A long crank time when the engine is first started, but it starts right up after that throughout the day. Poor fuel economy. If you jumpstart the vehicle, you still get a long crank time on initial startup. Spraying starter fluid down the intake eliminates a long crank time on initial startup. These sound like the symptoms of a weak fuel pump. So let's connect a fuel pressure gauge to the Schrader valve. I'm using an inexpensive fuel pressure gauge, and this one threads right into the Schrader valve. First, we check our key on engine off pressure. The fuel pump is supposed to operate for 2 seconds and produce a pressure between 60 and 66 psi. After those 2 seconds, the psi should drop down to between 56 and 60 psi. Here, the pump just builds up to 55, and that's it. It fails the first 2 tests. What happens if we try to start the vehicle? I try to crank it, but nothing. Pressure falls below 50 psi during cranking. A second crank is barely successful. There is no specification for idling psi, but looking at the forums, we learned that 50 to 55 psi is a good number. This is a weak fuel pump. Low voltage to the fuel pump can cause this condition. A quick voltage drop test on the fuel pump chassis ground came out to 0.07 volts. Anything below 0.1 volt is what you want to see. The battery was deemed okay by a battery tester. New fuel pump is made by Delphi, model FG0068. Looks sturdy. At first, I thought it was missing one of these metal bars, but that's the way it is. I paid $215 at rockauto.com. The fuel pump has been changed and the van has sat for 24 hours. Here's our key on, engine off. It builds to 60 psi and it drops to about 54. So it's okay on the first 2 tests. Now let's try to start it. Starts right up. Idling at 51 psi. Let's snap the throttle. Over the next few days, I put 100 miles into the van. The lean codes have not returned. Long-term fuel trims have gone down to 10% on both banks. Something mechanical might be happening at the central port injection side. The spider has not been upgraded yet. It still has the original factory unit. I'll be changing that in the near future. The van starts right up every time. Fuel economy has improved, and the way it drives is much better. When I used to go into the freeway, the van would have trouble building speed. New fuel pump made a major improvement to that issue. It is still running a bit lean, but not enough to trigger that code. The needle movements on the pressure tester were a dead giveaway that something was wrong with the pump. I hope you learned something. Have a good day.